So did we have enough JavaScript on this conference? Yay. So I was talking to many people at this conference, which is great, by the way, thanks to the organizers. I was talking to many people about JavaScript and their approach to JavaScript. And when I talked to them, it doesn't sound really positive for some reason. So people use expressions like, I have to do JavaScript, or I'd rather do Ruby, Python. Someone has to do it. I like this one. We have this JavaScript developer in our team, and I really like him because he's doing the shitty job. And there is the last one. People who know me, they know that I'm doing some JavaScript. So this is like a mandatory question to me. Which JavaScript framework should I use? That's the question. So which framework we are using? It's not really, I don't think it's only a Ruby and Python thing. I was talking about this topic to some other communities as well. And they've learned that that there's the same situation. For some reason, they don't love JavaScript. So Java people, PHP people, .NET people, it's very similar. So we're all backend programmers, right? I'm a Ruby programmer. I did some Python as well. But overall, we identify ourselves as backend programmers. And I think it was about 3 years ago, I made this data up. Somewhere during a night, I was coding some JavaScript because I had to. And I was thinking, okay, I have no idea what I'm doing, basically. It kind of works, but I don't really like it. I would prefer to do some Ruby stuff. But then I talked to some of my Ruby colleagues, and it seemed that it's not only about me. It's not that I'm the only stupid programmer. Actually, many Ruby programmers didn't like doing JavaScript as well. So I started generalizing this statement, but then I went to some other backend programmers, and it seems like a rule. Many of us don't like JavaScript because we don't know how to do it. It's not a hate. I think it's just lack of knowledge and feeling that you're maybe on the backend we know everything, and on the front end it's like some kind of magic. So my message to you is that for the last 2 years, I was doing mostly frontends. And 3 years ago, I was scared. I didn't like it, and it was my choice to start doing frontends, but I was really lost. So my message to you is that frontends are really, really easy. We are backend specialists here, and I have a lot of respect to all of you. We've learned the Rails, or Django, or other frameworks. There's a lot of things to learn. There's not that much to learn on the front-end side. And people are scared for no reason. We just need some good patterns. And that's important. But the good thing is that we've been there. We know the patterns. Maybe some of us here did desktop applications. It's exactly the same. We can reuse the architecture from desktop applications and apply it to single-page applications. So it's not that bad. Also, when you read about JavaScript frameworks or attend some JavaScript events, you may get the impression that JavaScript is all about widgets and views. And even on the front-end side, it's not really true. In our case, the GUI stuff, the views or widgets, is maybe 20 to 30% of the code base, of the JavaScript code base. So let's try to think about broader things than only about views and widgets. And the mandatory question, do we need a JavaScript framework? And if so, which one? I would say that frontends are much easier than the backend, so I will try to skip the answer. I say that you need libraries, certainly. There are many different places, like managing the GUI, managing Ajax, connecting with some, external APIs. You need some libraries for that. And if we are at the libraries topic, it's best to assume that JavaScript has no standard library. It's so broken that it's best to just take some external one, like Sugar.js, for example. But okay, do we need a JavaScript framework? I think maybe, but we didn't feel this need. And we've built like 30 different single-page applications without any framework. And I don't think we are missing any stuff, I don't think we spent too much time on it. What I can recommend is use frameworks as libraries. So don't let the framework drive your application, but take the best parts. For example, I like Angular. I like the way Angular.js deals with the reusable components. I would really like to steal it and use it in our applications, but I don't really want to have Angular drive my whole application. So, and I think that's possible. So we can take other things, like I like Backbone approach to dealing with REST resources. They have a really nice library for that. So you can combine all of those and create your own architecture without a single framework that drives you. And by the way, many frameworks advertise themselves that they have data binding, which is very cool at some point. But you have to be very careful when you have data binding and you have some data being pushed into your application via WebSockets, because things can start updating very quickly, and the UI can be unresponsive. And I think the Travis CI team had some problems with this approach as well. So for some time, the UI wasn't really great. So with JavaScript, I've identified like 4 phases, and this is like with every I think new technology or unfamiliar. So in the first phase, we are rejecting the technology. We're saying, I don't want to do JavaScript. I'm not going to do it. Then you realize that maybe you actually need to do it. So you try to find some shortcuts. And if there are Ruby programmers here, anyone remembers RJS? That was the shortcut that we were taking at some point, and that was really a bad direction. So we were generating JavaScript from Ruby. Another shortcut is using jQuery for everything. So you start combining those different plugins and just hope that everything works. And at some point, things start to break. So you need to debug. There are some compatibility issues. Some plugins require jQuery, another version. Some requires the newer version. So at some point, out of the mess, you're trying to find some structure because you're a programmer, so you know how to find abstractions. And maybe you will end up with an abstraction like a page object, maybe a widget object. Maybe it helps you doing some testing also on the JavaScript side, but it's still not the best point. And my team went through all of the phases until we realized a very simple, but also for us, it was very revolutionary thing, that frontend is actually a separate application, and that's the way you should deal with it. And if I say it's a separate application, I mean it's a different runtime, it's a different platform, different libraries, different language. And I'm saying it's kind of obvious, but I'm saying it because I was also doing the backend application, like Rails applications, that only had some JavaScript put on top of it, right? So everything was on the backend. There was just some JavaScript at the end. And that's kind of like a hybrid approach, not really recommended. So where is the border between the backend and the frontend? If we want to separate them, where's the border? And I think the border is where you do the HTML rendering. That's a very simplistic approach to it, but that's a nice separation. So if you do HTML rendering on the front end, you have a clearly different, separated application, separated front end. If you're still rendering HTML on your back end, you're in this hybrid side. So you're still not doing the really simple way of single-page applications. Obviously, it's possible. It's just too much complexity around it. So these are the responsibilities of frontends and backends. The frontend should initialize itself. The browser grabs the assets from the server, and then it fetches the data from the server. Then it's able actually to render the HTML. So the server just sends the templates. Everything is rendered on the JavaScript. And then we can start the UI cycle. So the user does something with the application, and we're responding. And there is actually quite a lot of business logic. There is a reason it's often called a rich client application. So what we are left with on the back end, we need to do some storage, obviously. We need to do validations because it's easy to cheat a request from a JavaScript. And we need API. We need some way of serving assets, but that's just only static files. And on the back end, you also need some business logic. So sometimes you end up with duplicating business logic on the client and on the server. Okay, so what would be the good front-end architecture in our case? So we started thinking... Our starting point was MVC. And I mean the real MVC, not the one that, for example, Rails calls itself MVC, which is not. So the real MVC, like from the old times, from Smalltalk and so on, where the important part is that model is in the center of the application. And when model changes, GUI changes. On the back end, you have no way of doing that. So You can do it on the front end, and that's a nice architecture that I will explain in a minute. I will use an example, which is hopefully well known. Anyone familiar with 2D MVC? Okay, a few people. So this is a really nice project. They collect different different implementations of the same application written in different frameworks or different approaches. So I don't know, there's like 40 applications right now. And if you want to get deeper into the front-end world, I think that's a good starting point. You can compare different approaches. There's Angular, Backbone, all of the popular frameworks. And you can see what you like, and you can just choose it. We've implemented, this is how it look like. This is a simple to-do list, as everyone does for examples. So you can add some tasks, edit, complete. You can do some filtering and show some stats. And that's all. We've implemented our example with the approach that I'm going to show right now. So it's on a GitHub, on the Gamebox account, and it's called 2D MVC. And hopefully soon it will be also on the 2D MVC webpage. Is it readable? Okay, great. So this is our model part for this application. At the end, you see the task class, which is very simple. It has just only one flag. And also we have this idea of having a use case for showing all the operations the user can do with the data. So what's important here is to see that it's a quite clean model. There's no persistence, no Ajax, no GUI, no other stuff. It's just it's all very clean. It's all very easy to test. It's actually it's easy to spot bugs if they appear somewhere here. And this is a simple example, but in our applications we do always the same way. So there is some kind of use case or many different use cases if the application is larger, and there is only business logic inside. And there is the GUI part, which is very easy. We do the DOM manipulation manually, which many people say is wrong, but I don't know what we are doing really wrong here. So we're using jQuery for adding classes, removing classes, and it's a very simple wrapper for jQuery. This is an example GUI class that we usually implement. So we have methods that are responsible for updating the task content, deleting the tasks. The methods are really reflecting the use case very often. Okay, those two things are separated. The GUI didn't really know about the model doesn't know about the GUI. So how it is actually, how is it connected together? And I like the name application glue because it appears it appeared at the talk about event-oriented architecture as well. And we do the glue with. Is it also readable? Yeah. Okay. So we have this idea of merging methods. We take the GUI object, we take the use case object, and we say, merge the similar methods together because they should be run at the same time. I will explain how it exactly works later. Just look at this. You can see that there is some kind of convention. The use case methods and GUI methods are usually using the same names. And if we follow the convention, actually all of it can become just one-liner, and it's auto-bind. It's auto-bind on the method level, not on the data level. So it's not really data binding. And the whole idea came from reading about hexagonal architecture. Anyone actually heard about it? Cool. There are some people here. So this hexagonal architecture idea came from Alistair Cockburn, and I think this diagram is for me, it's like one of the most important diagrams in software engineering. You can build many applications in this way, also on the backend and on the front end. I'm not even sure if that diagram came from a front end application or for a server application. But this idea can work everywhere. So you have this model or application layer, which is in the middle, and you have the idea of adapters. Everything is an adapter. Everything that doesn't belong to the model, to the domain, is an adapter. Everything that connects to external world is an adapter. A GUI is just one of the adapters. What kind of adapters we have, and this is also an example why GUI is just a small part of our application, is in our case we have GUI adapter or Canvas adapter if we use Canvas. We have server-side adapter for connecting with server-side. We have local storage adapter for connecting with local storage. And all of the things that are usually useful, like playing sounds, connecting with Facebook, connecting with Pusher. We use Pusher for pushing data from the server to the client or manipulating the router. so that the URL changes as it should. And if you look at this diagram, there was this model in the center, and you have different adapters. And it's basically a set of observers. It needs to be implemented as the observer pattern. So the model should observe different adapters, and also adapters should observe the model, but everything goes through the model. There's never a need for adapters talking to another adapter directly. There are 3 popular ways of implementing the observer pattern. We tried all of them. So at different stages of our learning, we tried different things. With callbacks, we've learned that it's a very good technique for doing non-model code. Like if you're sending an AJAX request, you have to use callbacks when it returns. So it's asynchronous. So it's good for a very localized place. But once you try passing the callback from the adapter to the model, you end up in a callback hell. So you will have a callback being passed in the model objects from one place to another, and it's very difficult to track, and it's very difficult to debug later on. With events, we had a slightly better experience than with callbacks. It's good for GUI. It's actually almost impossible to do GUI stuff without events. But it looks very ugly in models. Okay? And in models, when you do the triggering event from the model, you end up with almost every method in your model having a trigger some kind of event at the end, which is basically a duplication of the fact that the method actually exists. So we've been there, and then we refactored out from it because it was just ugly. And we ended up using method hooks. The idea comes from the very infamous world of aspect-oriented programming, but it's a very simple idea that you can merge methods together. Thanks to that, it's non-invasive, so you can have your model being merged with some other adapters without actually knowing about them when you code it. It's only known in the application glue, and it's only running there in runtime. So methods hooks are very good for model adapter communication and the other direction. So when adapter needs to tell something to the model, it's also there. So you just merge some methods together. It's very bad for model-model communication, and we also made that mistake at some point, that we tried to use method hooks everywhere because they're awesome, but they're not awesome for everything. They are very bad for model-model communication. So if you have models like, I don't know, your shop and an order and some product, and you start talking between those objects using aspects, so using method hooks, that can be very difficult to debug, and that's just wrong. It's very good for application glue, as I've shown before. And then the best thing is that the model is very clean. There's no triggering events, no callbacks. You actually escape from the asynchronous world. You can have your model, your domain, your use case. You can have your code without any asynchronous things, which is usually a thing that people hate the most when they enter the JavaScript world. So this actually, what I can tell you is that it's possible to hide from the callbacks and hide from the asynchronousness. So here is this glue code again, now that we at least slightly understand the idea. And there is a method called after, which is available thanks to one library called URDaBoss. And this after method, what it does is a very simple thing. It takes the first method, and it replaces the implementation of the first method on the left side with a wrapper function that calls both of those functions now. So the first function that existed there and the next one on the right side. So it's just simply combining functions together, and when someone calls usecase.addNewTask right now, both those two methods will be called. So after addNewTask on the usecase method, also the GUI addNewTask will be called. And that's really helping us with disconnecting those two things and keeping them separate. And it's a very simple declarative code. The application glue is very simple here. So it's easy to follow what is going on at the border between different layers. So after those layers are merged, this is what is the flow for example, for the deleting. it starts with the view. Someone clicked the view, the destroy button, and the view just says, okay, delete was clicked. I have no idea what I should do with it. And thanks to the application glue, it's merged into the use case delete task method. So the use case delete task method is running. It actually does the deleting of the task. Maybe it talks to some domain objects as well. And then use case says task deleted. And also the glue connects it to the view that the view is responsible for removing task DOM element and for changing task stats. So it's all it's up to your logic what should be done. And also at some point there is the storage connected. So we should say that remove this task from the backend or from the local storage or wherever you store it. So thanks to the things we learned about single-page applications, we actually changed our the way we work with our customers right now. So we used to be this typical Rails company doing typical Rails projects, and right now we're starting with the front end first. So when someone comes to us and they say, we want this, I don't know, shop application or a Facebook application or whatever, we start with the front end. We don't even initialize the Rails application. In the front end, we have this idea of in-memory server-side adapter. So it's just one adapter that is useful only for development. And we can show the results very quickly with our customers. And we build the whole front end first. And only then, once we have the whole front end ready, we actually implement the backend, because once we have the front end ready, we exactly know what's needed on the backend. We know how the API should look like. So if you're creating your API on the backend before knowing how the front end looks like, it might be a smell that you're guessing. The nice thing is also that if we build the backend at the end, we can postpone the decision of what do we use for the backend. We come from Rails. From a Rails experience, so usually we do API with Rails. But if at some point we want to do Node.js or something like that, we can use it and we can make the decision at the end. Yeah. So our conclusion is that in our experience, it's much faster to create a single-page application plus a backend API than it is to create a typical backend application only. Users love it because they have a faster user interface. It's very responsive. It's very, it feels great. Customers love it because users love it, so that's great. But the surprising side effect that I wasn't sure about when we started with that is actually that developers love it. And I had those are real quotes, and they are not like my employees or something, so it wasn't forced on them to tell it, but people really enjoy working on single-page applications once they understand the simple facts about the architecture that they are going to work on. So some people say it's the best thing since Rails, which is, I think, overstatement, obviously. But some people say that now I have some cooperation with developers that they say that they prefer working on single-page apps instead of on the backend, which is very surprising to me. But also I share this conclusion, so that's also my conclusion. I'm not living the Rails world, but I'm really enjoying working on frontends now than ever before. Here are some examples of the things we build. This is a simple social network application for golf players, and this is a screen of setting up an invitation for a game. So we're now building typical Rails application using this approach. It's all single-page app. Every click you make is very fast. There is no request to the server. So it's very quick. This is another example. It's a vocabulary trainer that we're working on. We turned this view from our typical Rails view into a single-page application, which I think we've deleted like thousands lines of code thanks to that. And it's all very responsive right now, very fast. It's just a view that shows your lessons, your expressions in the lesson, and the expression details. And this is for teaching, for learning new words. And this is a Facebook game. We have this idea that your friends play the game with you, and we use pusher for notifying what's happening real time. So we have this pusher adapter that talks to the use case, and the use case changes the position of the player on the board, and when it happens, the GUI reflects this thing. So it's all live, very quick, and it's also a single-page application without any reload. So I would like you to consider maybe this question that maybe it's worth thinking if your application is maybe it would be better as a single-page application. I've analyzed all of our company projects for the last 5 years, and basically every application that we did in typical Rails way would be better now with a single-page application, better for the users. So yeah, that's it. I recommend you to have a look at the To-Do MVC project to just start working on this idea and maybe enjoy creating nice frontends. Thank you. Do we have time for questions? Are there any questions? Yeah?
How do you deal with search engine optimization?
So the question is, how do we do with search engine optimization? And the answer is Google has a document which explains how to deal with it. It's an official document. And basically, you return different results for Google robots. So you need to have some very simple... Yeah, but you don't care about the views. It's just a simple HTML structure that you send back. Yeah?
How do you deal with loading time?
Mm-hmm. The question is, how do we deal with the loading time? The truth is that it is loading for the first time. It's loading slightly longer. We need to, for example, we need to load the HTML templates. For a bigger application, it might be taking longer. But there are many answers. Usually, it's only the first request that is happening for so slow, and then everything is cached, so it's fine. But also the other answer could be, we didn't try it yet, we didn't have the need, but you can also load only part of the JavaScript or parts of the HTML that you only use at this point, and then you can load the other ones later in the background maybe. Yeah?
What do you use for testing?
Oh yeah, testing is a good point. So thanks to this separation, we have this model layer separated from everything else, and it's very easy to unit test, or actually to test the whole domain layer, and we use Node.js-based tools for running the tests in the command line, which is nice because we can run them on the command line. I don't think we actually use any framework. There's a Mocha framework. I think it's on the Node side. There's a Mocha framework. On the browser side, we use Jasmine, which is also great, and it tests all the views together. But we replace the real backend with some fake backend. So sometimes we also run some Selenium tests to test the whole integration of backend and frontend. But once you have a very clear API in between, it's not really that important. So usually it's enough to have those Jasmine tests.
What about UI test while there?
Sorry, a second.
What about UI layer testing? Is it jQuery code?
The jQuery code.
Yeah, how to test it?
Yeah, so we test it with Jasmine. Jasmine runs in the browser, and we can, it actually manipulates the real DOM, so we can ask if this element is visible or not. And also sometimes we have the Selenium test, which tests the really real browser. So. Any other question?
Do you have special versions for mobile devices, or how do you handle that?
So far, we didn't need to deal with mobiles that much, so I'm not really that experienced. As far as someone from our team was experimenting, we can just replace the GUI layer with some kind of Sencha touch or some other framework that is good for mobiles. But we haven't done it that much yet, so we don't have really that much experience with that. Okay?
How did you because there was a single arrow to the network, like the storage of the loop. How does the storage failure, do you handle it on some
Yeah.
level?
So the server-side adapter has this idea of callbacks. So when there is an error happening, you get this on-error callback, which exists in the server-side adapter. And then it's also glued together to a use case, which says, because it wasn't shown here, it says basically that this task wasn't really deleted, for example. So the use case actually responds somehow to it, and then the GUI is glued to it, so everything works fine at the end. Okay, thank you.